All right, I am joined now by the great beat writer. He used to cover the Chicago Bulls throughout the 1990s. Now covers the Bulls for the Bulls website, Bulls.com. The great Sam Smith is with us today. Sam, welcome. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well indeed, and I'd say this Last Dance documentary has been a lot of fun to watch, and we've seen a lot of you in the documentary. So, what was it like when you got the call from director Jason Hare to participate in it, and what was your experience like going through that film?
Well, a lot of me in the documentary may not be good for ratings, but I happen to be around all the time. The truth is, I actually thought, I wrote this book back in the early '90s, the Jordan Rules, and it was somewhat controversial at the time, not so much now, and wasn't Michael's favorite reading material at the time because of the circumstances, the way it had marketed. And I think we've seen this in the documentary with David Falk, talking about setting him up as an individual star, and then and also some of his leadership views about kind of dragging everybody along to his level of excellence, which is hard to do, hard to match for anybody, really. So, and I've been traveling with the team quite a few years, and, this has been quite a bit of infighting, which is not unusual on any team, and in office and probably, and certainly in academic settings, basically what I know about universities. And so a lot of jealousies and a lot of various behaviors, but sports figures get featured a lot more. So I wasn't even sure they were going to talk to me, because Jordan's people are the executive producers, and they kind of done a load of interviews before they got around to me. And so I really wasn't paying much attention when they actually came to talk to me, because about a year ago, and I know they'd done interviews with people I know well, Phil Jackson and a number of players and Bulls executives, and then I'd heard they were doing 100 interviews, and they were talking to celebrities, as you've seen some of them, Justin Timberlake and Jerry Seinfeld. And so I figured it was going to be more than that. So I just sat down, and a lot of these things, I've been in a number of this documentary era has become popular, and I've been in a few with the Pistons and Dennis Rodman. And so usually what happens is they talk to you for an hour and a half, and they use like 8 seconds of tape. And so that's what I kind of thought it was. So it actually was more of a surprise to me as I've seen, some of the episodes, and, seen more of me than, like I say, ratings would like, as far as, me in a video presentation.
Yeah, I know you were a big spotlight episodes 5 and 6. We talk about the Jordan Rules book you just mentioned, and we saw, like Michael said, it's like, I was not a big fan of that book. And like, was the experience covering a team different for you after the book came out?
Yes and no. Not completely because of the book, but I've been traveling with the team 3 or 4 years, and we had our first child, and my son was young, and so I was sort of lobbying to get on the NBA beat, and that turned out to be a judicious time to do that. But I was still around the team, obviously, quite a bit, because, if you're covering the NBA for Chicago Tribune, the Bulls are pretty much the NBA for the most part. So I had cut my, day-to-day travel with the team. I had basically been to every game for the previous 3 or 4 years. So I was still at all the home games, and I would travel with him occasionally on the road, but I would also do some other NBA features. And it didn't, the only thing really changed was, I had a kind of a conversational relationship with Jordan before that, where I could joke around. And so without discussing it, we both realized that would be inappropriate, given the controversy surrounding the book at the time. And so, I was still covering the team and writing the same stories and talking to all the same people. And when I'd ask Jordan questions in group settings, and by then he wasn't really doing any one-on-one interviews anymore, other than with Ahmad Rashad, because he'd gotten so big, and celebrity had increased with the Bulls championship. And so he had walled himself off from most of the media. and made it in more formal sessions. And in those formal sessions, he was great with me. He was very professional, and I'd ask him a question, he'd answer it just like anybody else, and it was anyone else answered. And sometimes, it'd be, oh yes, Sam, this so and so. So I give him a lot of credit, because a lot of the players in this era tend to be very petty about that stuff. Russell Westbrook with all his next question stuff, and even in previous eras, Rasheed Wallace was very abusive toward media and uncooperative, and a lot of players have been. And Jordan, to his credit, was never like that, and certainly with me, he would presumably have more reason. Even though I never felt the book was any sort of attack, it was just a diary of what it was like behind the scenes with this team throughout the season. So no, I mean, I was, and I've, continued. I work with the Chicago Tribune covering the team in the NBA through 2008. And now I do it on the Bulls website, which I've been doing since 2008. So I've still been in the same place. Jordan has moved on a little bit and got a little more famous and wealthier. And I'm been perfectly satisfied to continue to be where I am and do what I do.
Yeah, obviously you covered Jordan for all those years. You got to see a lot more of like behind the scenes stuff than the general public would. Like, do you feel like his depiction in the documentary actors the Jordan you remember from your days covering him?
I do, because he's really relaxed and opened himself up for these interviews. And you can see he's sitting there with a cigar, and he's got a drink, on the table there, and he's been joking around, taking things in a light vein. The flashes of the competitiveness comes out, like with Isaiah Thomas or Jerry Krause. So I think it's been great, because a whole generation of people never see Michael Jordan like this. Basically, once his celebrity and other issues, gambling and stuff started to become public, he withdrew quite a bit, and that was 25 years ago, basically. And so I think it's great for people to see him as we saw him, and we knew him in the 80s, very innocent but fun, competitive, sort of like the ultimate president of the frat, just keeping parties going all the time with the gambling and the competitiveness and the games and ping pong or pool or golf or whatever it was, whoever he can get out and compete with something, cards, and he would be doing it. So I think it's been very openly, not revealing in a new sense, but revealing in a personal sense about who Michael Jordan is really to the way people who are close to him see him more often.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I say you have a unique perspective, because obviously you were there, you covered the run of those Bulls dynasties. Of the 6 title winners, like, which team do you think was the best one? Was it the 72 win team? You think another one actually was a little better despite a lesser record?
Well, in different ways. I mean, my favorite was the first one, because of the path that they had to take, and you saw how difficult it was with the series against the Pistons, and how frustrating it was to get past, and how many failures. But I also thought that team was the best team, that team in the 92's championship team, because of who Jordan and Pippen and Grant were at the time. They were such athletic marvels, combined with the skill level. And when Jordan came back, of course, the 95-96 team is most celebrated because of 72 wins and how dominant they were. But Jordan was not nearly as athletic. And I think you'll see that in the next episode when they talk about baseball, how he had to develop other muscles, and, how his body changed so much. And when he came back, he wasn't this tremendous defender, and he could do it in spurts. Wasn't this explosive offensive player, smarter, more skilled, had a better shot. But those teams, those first couple of championship teams in 91 and 92, before 93 was sort of a difficult season because of the strain of the, Pippen and Jordan having played at the Dream Team, and basically lost that summer, and basically went straight through 2 straight years playing every day. But you had the Jordan, probably the best defensive shooting guard in league history. Pippen, probably the best small forward defender in league history. And Grant, who at the time was probably the best athletic defender, full court, 94 feet in the league. We had those three guys at the same team at the same time in their prime. And I don't think we've ever seen or ever will see anything like that. It gets overlooked because of Michael's scoring, but their defense was so extraordinary and so suffocating that it was so intimidating for other teams that it just led to that dominance that kicked off that run.
Yeah, it did. The second half of the run was definitely, I felt, the more interesting, dramatic half. I mean, we've seen the 97-98 season. I want to ask you about, like, the 97, the flu game, which is obviously something, given the world we're living in now. We'll never see a performance like that again, given the real-world circumstances. What do you remember about that flu game that he had against the Jazz in the 97 finals?
Well, yeah, it clearly was sick. I'll tell you something that nobody knows. They don't talk about much, so that'll be your little news item for me. I think what it was altitude sickness, because that's what the symptoms he had. It didn't sound that great, and they sort of cast it off as the flu. But he was ill, but the team wasn't staying in Salt Lake City, which was a valley. It was in a valley. They were staying up in one of the ski resorts in Park City, and at a much higher altitude, and they kept coming back and forth to practices and going back up to this resort so they'd have the privacy. And there's been a lot of conspiracies about this as well. Some waiters poisoned them with bad pizza or something. There's been a lot of stuff, but I think that's what it was. Because the symptoms he had seemed like that. Now, me not being a medical professional, I can guarantee it. But he clearly was ill. I remember before the game, they were talking about him not playing. And, and that's sort of what gets lost in some sense, that, especially compared to this generation where they say, well, who's the greatest and this and that. He never didn't want to play. There was no load management. There was no resting. There was no taking. You check back, he played. He never missed games, ever. And he was playing, nearly 40 minutes a game all the time. And in that game, they had a little spare room. They could have waited to go back to Chicago and give him the game off. But he wouldn't hear of it. He says, I'm playing. And, of course, down the stretch, he hits the big three, and basically wins the game in the fourth quarter, with his play. So, that there's a cliche they talk about in sports. And all the coaches say, well, we got to play 48 minutes. We played 36. If we only played 48. Well, that's sort of a canard. Nobody plays 48 minutes. Well, he did. That was the difference. That's why he's different than the others, because from the moment he got on the court till he got off, he was attacking you, challenging you, and putting everything he did into the game. Probably why he wore himself out, so many times, like 92, 93, and had to get away from the game, and 97, 98 as well. So, but yeah, it was obviously something that just added to the legend.
Yeah, and that legend's being explored in The Last Dance right now, over that 97-98 season. I mean, we've seen all this stuff so far. We've seen the Scottie Pippen drama about the trade demand, the contract, Dennis Rodman going off to Vegas in the middle of a 48-hour vacation. You were there and you saw the craziness of all this. So what was it like to cover that season, knowing that this was the end and all this crazy stuff's going off the court? They're trying to win their third in a row again.
Well, it was the end, except if it wasn't going to be the end. Because Michael in 93, I was there, he said, I'm never playing again, 99.9%, but, you're never going to see me again. And so then we did, 19 months later or whatever it was. And I knew Phil well, and I knew Phil was going to take his sabbatical no matter what. And, but Michael, I knew he would play for another coach, despite what he was saying. And he did, played for Doug Collins for 2 years in Washington. And, as anyone has a right to, he does too. He changed his mind a lot of times. Wasn't going to play on the Olympics in the Dream Team in 92. Said it many times, and then he did play. And so who's going to tell Michael Jordan he can't play? And the Bulls weren't going to, despite whatever Krause and, had said, or actually, if Phil wanted to come back and coach, he could have, and he would have. And the truth was that season, Frank Hamlin, Phil's top assistant, was close with Michael, ran the triangle. Tex Winter was still on the staff. So essentially would have been much the same staff, if Michael wanted to return. But I think both he and Phil recognized that this was done. As you said, Scottie Pippen was off the rails with his trade talk, and I don't want to play for the Bulls again. And Rodman is taking off on vacations during the season, and this is all an old team too. They're all in the mid-30s, pretty much. Have been through an awful lot, especially including the last 2 years. And so, when you're doing a story, it's sort of like going to school, doing your life. You're just charting it every day. You don't look. You don't predict the future. And so it was just like any other season, with this great storyline to it that Michael got asked every city we went to. Are you quitting? Are you quitting? So it became repetitive and a little tiresome, to him and us, because every day for 5 months it's, well, are you coming back? Are you quitting? And, because that's what media does it then, did now. But it really wasn't any different from any other season, just because it was another season playing out to see if they could win a championship. And given that team, it just, because of the figures, Phil, Michael, Rodman, Pippen, there was just another different, bizarre storyline. But with those guys, it was always something.
Yeah, it always was. And I want to ask you real quick about Jerry Krause, who we've seen throughout this film is sort of painted as the bad guy of this. Do you think the portrayal of Krause in The Last Dance has been fair, or you think that he hasn't gotten enough credit for the work he did to put this team together?
Yeah, people ask me a lot about fair, and I don't understand the meaning of that all the time. It was accurate. I would not dispute that he was difficult to deal with. The players didn't like him, and that was all true. But it seems to me Jerry got a lot of credit. He was enshrined in the Basketball Hall of Fame. He was Executive of the Year twice, and so it wasn't like what he did was diminished. His colleagues voted him, the best in his field 2 times. That as many executives have gotten that. There's hardly any general managers in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Of course, that came recently. So I think it was displayed, portrayed accurately in the sense that, Jerry was a difficult person to get along with, and probably pushed himself, like Steve Kerr said in the first episode, couldn't get out of his own way. Your boss is not supposed to be at your celebration party. When the players are celebrating, like in Detroit, coming back on the plane, why is he dancing down the aisle with whoever it is? You're not going to make yourself the subject of ridicule when you do that. Could you imagine, a professor in your case doing that? When the kids are out, when you're all, unconscious from using drugs. That's what we hear anyway. No, I'm just kidding. Or, whatever it is at your office, is the business office, and, whatever, Apple, or, you think, or Amazon, you think Jeff Bezos is dancing down the aisles when they're, when they're celebrating how many boxes they filled, or, so get out of the way. That's not your place to be. And that's, and that's why they call it the executive suite, because it's a suite where you get to be. So, Jerry brought a lot of that on himself. He was a target for a lot of those years in Chicago, but a helpful one in the sense that Michael and Phil and others on the team used that, especially Michael, as motivation, as a way of bonding the team together. And, hey, management's out to get us, break us up, we'll show them. I think that's what Michael was doing all along, but, very strategically, and, just a lot smarter than, a lot of the other guys.
Yeah, indeed. And my last question for you is, obviously we end the era with the iconic shot over against the Jazz in the 98 finals to win the championship, 87-86, Game 6. What are your thoughts on that as the capper of the Jordan era with the Bulls? He goes on to play with the Wizards, but that was the last shot he ever takes at the Chicago Bull.
Yeah, right. and I didn't have any problem with him playing again. And if he wanted to play again now, I wouldn't be surprised if he thinks he can. So I'm not a believer. If it's something you do and like enjoy doing, you should continue to do it as long as they'll let you do it. I thought I remember, when he hit the shot, I thought, only Jordan can end things this way, because we did think that was the end for him. At least you said it. I'll be honest, like I said before, I wasn't convinced he was done, because I'd seen him come back and change his mind from so many things. But that was the narrative that was playing out. So I remember thinking to myself as I was watching this in Salt Lake, two things struck me. One, again, the way he shut up, an arena like in Cleveland in '89 and went completely numb and quiet. It's something you never see, never hear like that. And just thinking of all guys, to finish it this way, hitting the last shot, basically winning the game. I think they had 5 seconds left or something. Posing like he did, basically, to sort of say goodbye to the fans and, make this sort of dramatic flourish to the end of his career, say goodbye to the league. I think to myself, who else could pull this off? Basically script your exit like he did. So it was pretty great scene. But it summarized him, because what gets overlooked a lot was that sequence. He recognizes the play that Utah's running, so he comes up, gets off his man, goes baseline and steals the ball from Malone, starts bringing it up court, but doesn't call timeout. So Utah, great defensive team, can't set, and gets the matchup he wants against Brian Russell and hits the shot. So, it sort of defined Jordan in a lot of ways. Defense, IQ, offense, just this dominant all-around player that he was.
Yeah, indeed. Sam, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, do you want to let people high five on social media and keep up with your work for the Bulls?
Yeah, I'm right on Bulls website, bulls.com. I write books, which is another, sort of hobby. But I did Derrick Rose's autobiography last year, which is called I'll Show You, which is a good book on Rose. And I did a history of the NBA about 2 or 3 years ago, of the 60s and 70s, which has got some great stories about that era, called Hard Labor. So those are a couple of projects I've had fun with in recent years.
Yeah, make sure you check those books out, people. They do sound great. Sam, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it.
And I'll just tell you the last thing. I got a lot of memories of Iona College. I played baseball at Pace University when I went to college, and we were up at Iona quite a bit. And I was a pitcher in a lot of miserable, cold spring days up there, and also got to know Jeff Rulin pretty well as in the NBA. So have some affection for Iona as well. All right, well, good to talk.
All right, and there you have it. That was Sam Smith, the great NBA writer, covered the prime of Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. A lot of great stories there. Great time talking to Sam Smith. Up next, we will dive into the finale of The Last Dance. We saved the best guest for last. He's back. John Stanko is here talking Last Dance right after this.